it's really good for you to hear from some teachers who have been through this process with us before. There are 3 teachers that are going to be speaking with you and giving their experience from the perspective of a teacher who's participated in the summer research experience for teachers and PD and have implemented those exercises and activities that they created at the showcase in their classrooms with the scientists throughout this previous school year. And so I think without further ado, I'm going to stop share here, and Tredina is going to be speaking first. Brian's just queuing up her presentation here, and we'll turn things over to Tredina. Tredina, just make sure you unmute.
Good morning. My name is Trina Shepherd, and I am from PK Young Developmental Research School out of Gainesville, Florida. My title this upcoming school year will be University School Assistant Professor, where I will continue to teach 8th grade science. In addition, I am in my 3rd year as a PhD student in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in science education. My career focus wasn't always centered around science education, and more specifically in a K-12 learning environment. Back in 2012, when I took on the challenge of accepting my first teaching experience, I constantly looked for opportunities to develop my teaching ability. In doing so, I was always engaged with experiences and finding experiences to share with my students. Next. Last year, I had the opportunity to be a part of the summer program, Scientists in Every Florida School. This opportunity connected me with Dr. MollySilva, who is a botany professor at UF. Not only did I have the opportunity to explore her lab, but was allowed access to complete a PCR assay on fern samples. I was able to share this experience with my students with photos so that they could connect my experiences from over the summer to our shared experiences in the classroom. In addition to the lab experiences, I developed an escape room where students had the opportunity to learn the differences among plants and a plant-focused nature walk activity, which you see a couple of pictures on the slide, where you see students exploring our school outside environment with a focus on non-flowering plants. I would encourage you to check out the GoFlag website for additional resources, including a variety of virtual plant simulations that were developed by the team that I was introduced to over the summer and was able to incorporate in my classroom last school year. Next. Scientists in Every Florida School definitely provides an opportunity to collaborate and connect with other teachers, graduate students, scientists, and researchers. Even though I have had the opportunity to work with MollySilva in the past, it was great to have the ability to have a conversation with her through SEFS. Molly is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to human evolution, and her ability to connect her passion to relatable content covered for students to not only understand grade level concepts, but also learn something new when it comes to human evolution. This past school year, Molly taught a lesson titled Our Human Origin Story. And in the pictures, you see students engaging with the morphological differences of a spectrum of crania as we discuss species. I encourage you to check out Molly's website, which is listed under the pictures. And I would also encourage you to take advantage of this PD to explore, connect, and collaborate with others to enhance your science classroom experiences. Thanks.
Thank you, Tredina. I'm sure there's probably some folks out there that have some questions for our presenters. What I thought I would do is move to the next presenter, and then right after we finish those presentations, we'll kind of open it up to a generalized Q&A, and you can direct questions to them about their experiences should you have some. So I think our next presenter is Jonathan, is that correct? Yes, okay. So Jonathan is going to talk a little bit about his experience.
Hi there. Okay. Okay, so I think I've got a couple slides. Can you go to my first slide, please? So everywhere we go, almost everything we do, there's an opportunity for inquiry. Now, when you hear the word fossil, you probably think of like giant dinosaurs, right? Now, mastodon skeleton, really cool. Right away, when I saw it, I saw the size of the rib cage, and I was thinking, what did it eat? Was there an abundance of food, or did it have to eat all it could when it could? What preyed on it? Did that help in its defense? The actual size of it. Now, last summer through the program, I worked with Michael Ziegler, and he's a paleontologist. And so after a tour of the Florida Museum of Natural History's paleontology department, which was incredibly cool, we went into the loading dock and actually saw fossils that had come in, wrapped in the plaster. And we went through the paleontology departments where people were actually, taking them out of the wrapping and cleaning them and figuring out what goes what. And you can see where everything is cataloged. And we saw, giant dinosaur bones like on the bottom there. Can you go to my next slide, please? So after we went through the whole department, we worked to find microfossils. Yes. Michael finds and studies microscopic fossils. So we worked in his lab, and we had samples from the Montbrook site here in Florida, and we were actually going through searching for the fossils ourselves. And it just, I don't know, I'm a bit of a geek like that. It thrilled me. I really, really enjoyed it. This immediately translated in my head into lessons of sorting and characterizing objects based on their physical properties. So perfect for the start of the year for pretty much all the grades. And by the way, I do a K-5 STEM lab for about 1,000 students. So it's constant and got a nice wide variety, but this worked for pretty much everyone. So I began by sharing my experiences and showing some of the photos and the video, and that really pretty much got them all hooked. So just about all the students were wrapped in every class that I taught. For the older students, we added things, more physical properties such as volume and buoyancy as well. Now, I plan to have the students meet Michael in the spring so they could show off their STEM fair projects. One of my other hats is I run the STEM fair for the school. And we can talk about the issues with science fair, STEM fair later. Believe me, I know. So I was going to have him come in the spring, like in March. Well, you know what happened. So we wound up going with a virtual visiting scientist meeting, and it really was a hit with the kids. Now, students had to do a little bit of research beforehand on him, and I provided them with some information, but they had to answer some questions to qualify. Then they had to actually produce their own questions. So we're doing science, but we're also incorporating literacy aspects of it, and critical thinking skills and higher order thinking. And so I actually wound up with about 30 fantastic open-ended questions. We didn't even get to all of our questions because our time ran out. But Michael commented on how incredible the conversation was, because there were questions not like, oh, do you like being a scientist, but real in-depth, open-ended questions that kind of promoted a conversation between the scientist and my students. And they really got a kick out of it. So that was a lot of fun. Now, nature of science itself, I'm a big fan of. It allows for lessons that really support that critical thinking and collaborative problem-solving skills. These skills are not just important for science lessons, but can also be applied to life. We know that they're necessary for middle and high school. However, we just can't expect students to show up in middle school with critical thinking skills. They have to be taught at the elementary level when a thought is being developed, the way they think is being developed, I'm sorry. One of the other things by attacking this in elementary is it kind of becomes part of the student's thought process and shows that science itself is relevant. Now, many students, visual and kinesthetic learners, and nature of science really does lend itself to those kinds of learning types. And again, if a kid can learn in a way that means more to them, like I'm visual kinesthetic myself. If I have someone just lecturing at me or I'm reading a textbook, I don't always get the connection. Same thing with students. You have to get them up, have to get them moving. Nature of science can be applied to pretty much all the different disciplines we're teaching, and it gets them out of their seat, and I'm not just learning science. It gets them into an activity, they're collaborating, they're working together. I'm not on top of them, I'm guiding, but they're actually self-guiding their conversations, analyzing their own thinking, and kind of correcting each other with evidence through conversation. So one of the other important benefits of this, through the program last year, when I generated these high interest standard-based lessons with these real world connections, students actually looked forward to coming to STEM Lab. They absolutely loved it. And one of the most important things was that they learned that it's okay to be a scientist. They can be a scientist. I teach in a high needs Title I school. A lot of these kids, they don't know what's out there. They just don't have the life experience, and neither do their parents. So seeing that, oh, I like science. Oh, science isn't that scary. Oh, there's a different branch of science I like. This is a possibility for me for an actual career choice. So having the Scientist in Every Florida School program really did help with that. You know, these lessons became the type that the kids not only look forward to, but they talked about it with their parents, you know, and they talked about these things months after the lessons. They would relate what we learned back to other lessons. So one of the important benefit was showing how the science we're learning in school actually applies to the real world. So their lessons are not just some abstract concept. You know, one of the most important lessons, again, they learned that they could be a scientist. Okay. Now, all the scientists in the program, not only accessible, but eagerly shared all their resources. I had great discussions last year, not only with the scientists, but other teachers from around the state. We're constantly brainstorming, sharing ideas about lessons, what would work, what wouldn't. My eyes were opened up to a ton of different resources and a different way of approaching things, which I'm still using and I'm very thankful for. In our lab tours, I was constantly taking pictures, scribbling notes about something that inspired me and made me think, hey, I can adapt this for something in my schools. Yeah, even though I didn't do the plant biology lab last year, someone was doing investigations about different colored light at different stages of plant growth. And that's something that's very easily translated to elementary school students and helps them think critically and understanding how the nature of science works to answer questions and solve problems and move things forward. Sorry, I get a little excited about this stuff. Stephanie, the image on the right-hand side.
Yes.
Yeah, that should be a video. That's a 30-second video. Can we play that?
Let's see.
If it's not playing, then forget it. It's just me actually finding microfossils and being really excited about it. Well, if it doesn't play, don't stress.
Why don't you keep talking? I'll load it and come back to it.
Okay, no problem.
We have a question actually, Jonathan, and since we are trying to get that video playing, I'm just going to go ahead and interject the question now for you.
Go ahead.
Rick wants to know, what are the microfossils in the pictures along the bottom of the slide?
Okay, so in the middle there, I've got like that long rectangular piece. It's actually a piece of fossilized fish bone. The little round ones in the middle, those, like the one right in the middle here, I'm my mouse and you guys can't see my cursor. That's kind of silly, sorry. But in the middle circle, the little round one, that's actually a microscopic fossilized bivalve. I forgot the technical scientific name. Please forgive me. There you go. The ones on the right-hand side are fossilized pieces of fish scales, and the kind of long one on the left side of the right circle is actually a tooth.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. Now in the top left here, you can see those are some of the fossils in with the grains of sand that we were sorting through. So, okay. So I think that's pretty much all I got. I'm probably less than 5 minutes, and sorry about that. Sometimes
and
I
Bruce
talk a little
just added
fast.
a comment actually regarding the fossils Jonathan's talking about here. They are mostly about 6 million years old, and they're all from Florida localities. So we have scheduled later on this week a virtual field trip, hopefully into some of those Florida localities, as well as the collections. So you'll get an opportunity to see that. And I know Jonathan also mentioned some of the virtual tours, well, not virtual at the time, they were physical tours last year, but we're going to take some virtual tours We've got one upcoming after the presentations and testimonials today. Brian, did you have any luck with that particular video by chance?
It looks like, unfortunately, I don't have permission to access it, so we could share it with the group at another time.
Sure,
Oh,
absolutely.
not a big deal. Sorry.
So then, thank you though, and we will get that out to you all. I think we'll transition now to Elizabeth. She's going to tell us about her experience, and then we'll open it up more to some questions for all three of our testimonial speakers.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Elizabeth Davis. Like Tredina, I also work at PK Young Developmental Research School here in Gainesville, Florida. And also similar to Tredina, my background before I became a teacher was that I actually worked as a scientist in a research lab before transitioning into education. So Tredina was my mentor during my student teaching internship, and then this year I took on the role of biology instructor at PK Young. So it's been fun. I was able to move up with the kids from 8th grade to 9th grade. So we had a lot of fun this year. So last summer during this PD, I was in the Kawahara lab at the Florida Museum, and they study Lepidoptera. So they study lots of moths and they study butterflies. And they were gracious enough to come to our classroom back in February. So before coronavirus hit, we actually were able to get the scientists into the classroom, which was wonderful. And they were launching their own project called Frass in the Class. So Frass is like insect poop. So the kids are very interested to learn about that. But they introduced kids to the painted lady butterfly and its taxonomy, its anatomy, behaviors, life stages, its ecological role. So this kind of tied in with a lot of the content that we had been learning at the time. We were talking about different evolutionary aspects of biology and getting into ecology a little bit as well. So this tied in nicely with a lot of topics that we were covering and that students are required to know. So the goal of this project was to provide students with caterpillars. So they were supposed to be eggs, but they hatched a little early. So we got them when they were little itty bitty caterpillars, and they were to raise them into butterflies. So you can see the picture on the top right. They had each caterpillar was in a group, and they had little food at the bottom of the cup, and they had to, monitor the growth of their caterpillars and determine when they were big enough to be put in their own individual cup. And they had to be able to divvy out the food. And we learned all the different aspects of caring for caterpillars and butterflies, like what do they eat? Why do they eat that? Where can we find that in our environment? And then they got so invested in this that they named each caterpillar. We had over 60 caterpillars and each one had its own name. The kids were very invested in this. And so, like I said, the kids are very excited. And I was also excited because you could see what exactly they were learning. So this tied in with a lot of, like I said, the content specific standards that we were learning, but also nature of science. So students were talking about why insects are important ecologically. They had to maintain a lab notebook throughout the course of their butterflies' life. So they had to record quantitative as well as qualitative data. And so some students would choose to measure the length of their caterpillar or draw pictures of what they were seeing. But they had to keep very detailed lab notebooks. And so we also had to talk about, what things you need to include, such as the date, maybe the time that you're looking at it, where it was positioned in the classroom, all those sorts of things that maybe they wouldn't have thought to include. And so what was really cool was that we were able to raise our caterpillars into butterflies, and then students were given the option of if they wanted to keep maintaining those butterfly colonies within the classroom, or we could send them over to the Florida Museum to be released into the butterfly garden they have over there. And that was right around the time that COVID started to hit. So students, they actually elected on their own to have the butterflies moved over to the museum so that they could live a more prosperous life than they could have in our classroom. And so the students were very happy to learn that the researchers were able to come back and pick up the butterflies right before school closed. So the timing on that was really nice. But this was a great project. The kids really loved it. And then if you go to the next slide, we were also able to have another visitor. So like Tredina mentioned earlier, MollySilva has pioneered this project called the Human Evolution Teaching Materials Project. And so she is just fantastic if you can have her in your classroom. She makes 3D printed fossils of different hominid skeletons, I suppose. And it allows students to kind of hold these fossils that normally they wouldn't be able to see or touch, and without having to worry about like damaging them because it's a 3D print. And she has all of these files accessible on her webpage as well. So if you have access to a 3D printer, you can print these on your own. And so what students did in my class was we did an activity on mandibles. And so they were comparing the hominins in terms of their teeth and their diet. So we had these 3D printed mandibles. They were shown the full skull, but they were given the mandibles to work with. And we had 2 different hominin species that we were looking at. And so we had to learn about, you know, what each of the teeth in the jaw do, what is their role, and then students were able to measure them in order to see if they could make some sort of connection between what teeth they were seeing and what diet they believed that that hominid would have eaten. So if you go to the next slide, I think I have a few more pictures. Yeah, so the one on the bottom, I know the little red arrows are kind of hard to see, but they were measuring the distance of each tooth from the cheek to the tongue side. And so this was a really interesting lab for the students because they were very interested in learning just the background that Molly presented about, well, what are paleoanthropologists? What do they do? How do they find fossils? And so all that kind of background information really helped get them excited for the lab that they did. So I know I've talked quite a bit, so I'll end there, but thank you guys for your time.